Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the football experience. We had a little bit of a delayed break because I can't remember on the last pod. I was a little bit sick, and then it got worse before it got better. And then, for any medical professionals out there, I had a 2-day hiccuping extravaganza. I could not shake the hiccups, and for our listeners, I don't think it would have been very pleasant for me to be hiccuping during the entire show. I'm still coughing a little bit, so I'm going to be muting myself, at least when Caleb's talking, to save people's ears. Hopefully,
most of the time, to be fair. But
yeah.
Hey, any medical professionals, leave in the comments any suggestions. We need to get the bottom of this case of the curious 2-day hiccups.
Yeah, I don't know what it was like. Alright, so I'd hold my breath. You know how the usual ones, like hold your breath, drink like a heap of water, and like just like, you know, scull a heap of water. I'd do things like that. It would go away for like 20 minutes, half an hour, and then it'll just come back. And then like it'll just like come back like harder and stronger.
With a vengeance.
With a vengeance, yeah. So it was a combination of like a dry cough and a hiccup. I told Caleb before we went live, my speculation is that maybe as I was inhaling to try and clear my throat and get rid of and also to cough, maybe I was like inhaling weirdly or too much, and I don't know if hiccups have any correlation with that. So guys, leave a comment below. Have you had
one like equals one prayer?
Yeah. So that's I guess that's the delay in regards to like this episode coming out, but we're gonna try to get through this one. Caleb, you're gonna have to take the leads, take the reins. I see you've got your Liverpool shirt on. Don't know what you're celebrating to have that on.
No. You stick with your team through the bad times, through the good times. That's what you got to do. And hey, I'm wearing the 2020-2021 kit, so that's the vibe that we're going for this season. And if we can miraculously get into top four, I still don't know how we finished third that season. So something like that could happen again. Please come our way this season.
Well, on the last pod, I predicted that that should happen. If you can remember, I predicted that you guys will sneak in, or I don't know whether it's really a sneak in, but like you guys will claw back into the top four. I was saying that knowing the results to Brentford. So let's start with that.
Well, what's your? I want to know what your rationale is behind that after you know the result at Brentford. I guess you didn't know the results that the other teams chasing would have, so has your opinion changed over those midweek fixtures?
Let me have a look at the table. I should have pre-prepared this and had it up, but
hey, we know you've been battling the hiccups.
Yeah, I've been having my own personal battle the same way that Liverpool's having theirs.
Whew. Oh no.
Let's see. Same matches played as United. 7 points behind. Still have to play United at Anfield. So if that's a win, if everything stays the way it, yeah.
Anfield's looking less and less like a fortress nowadays, though. With the team that goes out there.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Are you sticking to top four then? In this, we're not even halfway.
We do
need to say that.
You know what? United have this weekend coming up. They have City, and then the following weekend they have Arsenal, and then after that, I think they have mid-table to bottom of the table teams for the next like 4 or 5 weeks before they finally face another like top 6, top 7 team. So I want to see how they get through January before I reevaluate things.
Well, you know what's a funny thing about that, though, we could be talking in completely different terms about United after those two fixtures. If they could come out with 6 or 4 points even, then maybe we're starting to talk about them in a title race rather than in a race for top four. Because then they've really put something together since those first two games. And if it's 6 points, I think come the end of those 2 weeks, I think they'd have to be considered in that, especially beating the top two teams in the country. That would be something remarkable, I guess. But look, for me, I think what I've seen from United, and I said on the last pod, is far superior, barring those two debacles in the opening two games, to what I've seen from Liverpool. Liverpool seem to, at best, be stale and stagnant, and at worst, they seem to actually be regressing. Klopp, I guess, decided after the winter break that he's going to double down. We've been using that 4-4-2 sort of hybrid for those weeks leading into the World Cup break, but since we come back, we go back to the traditional 4-3-3. It's just that, and it's like, we're not saying anything new. It's just, I said it about Tottenham, didn't I? I said, you know what, there comes a time where you actually need to play well. It's not all is well and good when you say, oh, well, that's great, they picked up points without playing well. Liverpool, we've been saying it all season. Well, we expect them to eventually click into gear. They just needed to recharge the battery somewhat from last season. It's not that. I don't think it's that. This might be a bit too big a statement, given that we're not halfway as well. And I'm not ruling anyone out. And I kept making that mistake last season. But I'm not ruling anyone out of the top four race, because things ebb and flow when you're not the elite teams. And I think, I don't know, Newcastle are teetering. United, as we've said, are teetering between, are they a higher level or are they in that top four race? If they get it, I think once you're in that top four race, your level just, for some reason, just gets dragged down to a top four. Because that's where you are. That's the kind of team you are, and you're gonna be inconsistent at times. There's going to be patches, good and bad. So I think that's what you expect in a top four race. But I don't know. Liverpool's patch seems to be the worst. I think I would actually put Chelsea as a better looking team at the moment than Liverpool, to be quite honest. And I think Liverpool are the weakest of the contenders for that top four spot as we speak.
I don't know. It's hard to rule them out.
Just because but at the same Liverpool. Time, I wouldn't rule us out, but I just think as we speak, like, who would you put any of those top four contenders as weaker than Liverpool right now?
Chelsea, I think, are. They haven't. So you know what? I thought just, and I think we might be on the same page here. Chelsea, once they went 1-0 down, and once Gallagher came into, and we'll get into the City game, they looked a completely different team. If that Chelsea can play, then yes, they probably are at this time better equipped than Liverpool.
Now, obviously with Chelsea, what scares you? And we'll go bigger picture before we go into the game, I guess, because we're now talking about Chelsea. I have actually liked what Potter's doing since the restart. I think he's just simplified it. He understands that he has at least the potential for a good, probably in entirety back four, except for, and that's excluding the goalkeeper, because I think either Mendy needs to come back in and play like European Cup winning Mendy, or they need a new goalkeeper, because, all right, when we get to the game, Arrizabalaga, what is he doing? But, I think, but for that, I mean, I thought they played pretty well in the City game. So when I look at them since the restart, and you think of this World Cup bump, I think that Chelsea got, with Ziyech coming back from a great run with Morocco, Pulisic even had a good run with USA. The striker is still a concern, and that's the point. When I think of it straight away, the point is Chelsea's injuries are, I think, what's holding them at Liverpool's level. I think if they had everyone fit, I think they're probably, and playing pretty well, I think they're probably clearly a better team than Liverpool, a more functional team. I think Liverpool are obviously very top heavy, have their own injury concerns. Obviously, Virgil van Dijk out, I think, for 6 weeks, as reported after this game. So I don't know. We're speaking after the FA Cup tie. I guess we might talk a bit more on that on the next pod. But I was tempted to say after that game, maybe Verge going out for a while, could it be a little blessing in disguise? But I don't know, seeing this morning, it wasn't great. But anyway, back to Chelsea. The injuries. And you think straight away, I'm even thinking, you think of the obvious in Chilwell and Reece James, who were sat behind Potter on the bench. I think Mount was out for this game as well. Obviously, N'Golo Kante's out. And then I'm even thinking of someone like Armando Broja up front, who I think would be a much better option than Aubameyang. Aubameyang is miles off it, nowhere near it. And the other weak spot, apart from goalkeeper, so I guess Chelsea have key weak spots. But I think if Chilwell comes back, you eliminate one in Cucurella. And I guess I just want to ask you this question before you go on to Chelsea or the game or wherever you want to take it. But could Marc Cucurella be one of the worst signings in recent times? Because early signs are not good, and the pundits have started to get on him finally. I think this weekend, both Shay Given and Jamie Carragher went in quite hard on Cucurella in their analysis of him. And to be fair, I think we've been saying it for a while. Especially, I think it's the next level of Chelsea. I think we even talked about it on the last pod. It's the next level of being at Chelsea. It just doesn't seem to have coped with it. And to pinpoint it, there was one moment in the first half where I think there was a through ball played, and it was Odegaard, I think it might have been. And Odegaard sorry. Why am I thinking of Arsenal? It was City. It was, who was it? It was De Bruyne. And he started like 2 yards behind him, and Cucurella, the through ball was played on the inside of him. It was away from goal, which saved him. But Cucurella had probably 2 yards, and De Bruyne just breezed past him with no resistance, got to the ball first, and then I think played it back to João Cancelo, who literally just sort of he didn't even sprint, he didn't do a move, he just sort of 75% jogged towards the byline. Cucurella didn't get close to him, and then he put a cross in wherever he wanted. And I'm just thinking, how could you be so ineffective in every moment of the game? He just looks, he feels like a cone out there. There's nothing intimidating about him. He can't affect the game, it looks like. And it's just wow, man. And to be fair, I thought he was really good at Brighton last season, but he needs to impose himself on the team, because I think he can last for much longer. And Potter's got a big decision, I think, because I think even Hall at this stage looks a better shout than him, even though he misses that terrible chance at the end. But yeah, I guess throw it over to you wherever you want to take it from there.
Well, we started talking about the top four, I guess, between Liverpool, United and Chelsea. Just to answer your question in regards to Cucurella, the hiccups are back. Far out. In terms of worst signing this season... Oh man! Oh man! Oh no! We might have to take a direction where I ask the questions, not you. So I just insert myself for 10-15 seconds. In terms of worst signings, probably just because of the price tag. But Aubameyang has been just as bad.
Yeah, but that was 17 minutes or something.
Yeah, but also, at least Cucurella is getting game time, but is he getting game time just because there's no other option because Chilwell's injured, rather than him just not being good enough or what it is? Whereas Aubameyang is having zero impact. At least Cucurella in some parts is having impact.
Yeah, and I think probably from that point of the game he was a little bit better, but still, what did they pay for him? Do you know the price? £60 million, £65 million?
I thought it was 70.
It was something ridiculous. 70 even. Wow.
Or maybe it was Euro. Maybe it was Euros 70.
To be fair though, if we're talking about ineffective, we need to look at the other defender they signed in the summer to look at ineffective, because Wesley Fofana, obviously, maybe not his fault, although maybe he's getting to a point where he's just showing himself to be injury prone. I don't know how much it was. That was close to 80 mil itself. and he had played like 2 games this season. So at least Cucurella could be available, I guess. But oh boy, he needs to do something in a Chelsea shirt because I think the fans can sniff it. I guess we should talk about the game though, and maybe the job that I guess Graham Potter's doing since they've been back from the restart. And to be fair, I was talking about it before how they've simplified it, and you look at probably the starting 11 that he would want out there, and I think they could probably mix it with anyone in the league. Maybe striker, we always lamented that, but I think Thiago Silva and Koulibaly, at least on paper, has potential to be a really good partnership. I think Chilwell and Reece James could be the best pair of full.
Just really quickly, I'm going to insert myself. You know how you were talking about in the last pod, Liverpool are like that horse that's like really well drawn, like at the back and up front, but in the middle.
Yeah.
Chelsea is like really well drawn in the middle and the back, you could say, just because of Thiago Silva.
Well, when everyone's fit.
But then the horse, like the front line, they'd have no striker. So like the front line is ineffective in terms of delivering goals.
Yeah, no, the striker point is the big one. They don't have a focal point, and I think it's really unfortunate. I think Broja went out with like an ACL or something in I was going to say pre-season, mid-season friendly, I guess. And I thought he was about to take the spot, and I thought like he's not ideal for Chelsea, but I thought he would have been the best option. And the beauty of him, he would have been coming into the team with no expectations, unlike all the strikers that Chelsea have bought in the past. So maybe it's time to kind of go that route. And you think of their forward options as well. Like I said, Ziyech coming off the World Cup. Pulisic, who gets injured again, but he came off a good World Cup. Sterling had a half-decent World Cup. I guess Mount got a few games, but injuries just throughout everywhere. So while I didn't necessarily think Potter was doing the best job when he came in, but I wasn't really going to judge him at that point. I think the way, like, you would think a manager like Potter might want to overcompensate being at a huge club by showing how clever he is and trying to do all these sort of smart tactical things. But I think the way that since they've come back to the restart, they've just gone 4-2-3-1, put players in probably their best positions to succeed. And right now he's just kind of been hampered by injury. So I'd be willing to give him somewhat of a pass because I think he's doing the right thing to not the best results. But I don't think that Chelsea supporters and the media will be as forgiving and as willing to give him that kind of pass. And I think if things sort of start to continue, this could get sour pretty quick for both, really.
Haven't they announced the signing of that Monaco defender?
Oh yeah, Badiashile.
Yeah,
but they've got him. So,
but they need a forward. So like, before we get into the game, just quickly, what forward can they sign in January? Considering Aubameyang is not the player he was 3-4 seasons ago, and Broja is out for the rest of the season.
Well, without going into great depth, but one that just pops straight to my head for January, and maybe not as long-term a one, but who knows, maybe he works out, is Arnau Danjuma from Villarreal, who Gerard Moreno starts in front of him. If you want that type, I don't think you want that type of striker, Gerard Moreno, who's a little bit slower, more creative strikers. I think on the last pod I called him a poor man's Harry Kane. He's a little bit in that mould. So I think maybe his teammate in Danjuma, who had a good Champions League campaign last season, quick, can play anywhere across the forward line. He is a striker. He does play up front, but like he can play across the whole forward line. So, and maybe you could get him on loan if Villarreal aren't looking to play him that often. But yeah, I don't know. He pops to my head, but I don't think it will be. The reason I'm thinking of someone like that is because I don't think it will be a long-term solution. I can't see a striker. I can't think of a striker off the top of my head that just pops to my mind that Chelsea could go out and get in January.
I can give you one.
Yeah, go on.
What about Dusan Vlahovic?
Perfect.
Considering Juventus's financial problems and the fact that Chelsea are still full of bags of money.
Yeah, I had that as a topic, so I'm happy that you said that. And as you're going into it, there's the perfect one. I can't believe I don't know what happened for Dusan Vlahovic to all of a sudden become the black sheep of Juventus. Like I thought at the start of the season, this guy was going to be key to their hopes of accomplishing anything. And now Juve are on this bounce of somewhat Tottenham-like performances and results. But it probably even better. I think it's 7 wins on the spin, and I think maybe the same amount of clean sheets in that time, which is just staggering to think. I think they're the best defense in Europe. So, and you watch them every week, and they're far from convincing. But Vlahovic, I mean, have you seen any prices quoted for that?
Well, last season when he signed for Juve, that was in January. Wasn't it like 65 or 70 mil that they signed him for?
Yeah, it sounds about right. You're on mute.
I imagine. I'm just trying to save people from the hiccups. The sound of hiccups. I imagine it might be discounted just because Juve. I don't know. Look, there's speculation that they're like. I don't think it's actually speculation, but it's reports that they're heavily in debt. So, because their hand might be sort of forced, it might be discounted down to like maybe 50, maybe.
Maybe. So we'll work within those parameters, and I think 50 now you're looking. That's a pretty good discount, especially if those rumors are true and Allegri's sick of him as well. Then I think you should be looking to get a discount. It's odd though. I'm still baffled at where that came from because it did look like he'd be a key man for them. Yeah, and I guess what we're saying as well, because I believe the Enzo talks have either stalled or broken down. So maybe you just take that money and you reinvest it in Vlahovic. And I think he's a more needed signing. Maybe they have more information on whether N'Golo Kante can come back in or not this season, because even if he does, he'll get injured again. He's just perennially injured now, it seems, so, which is unfortunate. But if they can rely on him for a bit of the season, then their midfield is still pretty strong. I think both positions need an upgrade or reinforcement. The upgrade is up front. Reinforcements in midfield. It's crazy how much money they're willing to spend. But yeah, I think Vlahovic is a good shout if you reinvest that money, actually, I think. But do you think United should be coming in for Vlahovic as well?
Maybe, but I don't know.
Do you like the look of Martial? But do you want to trust Martial as a striker? You don't want to put Rashford up front again. He's playing so much better on the left.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they do need that marquee striker. Which system would he fit better? That's the thing. Maybe he would fit Ten Hag's system better.
Well, the problem if he goes to Chelsea, he's another expensive striker, highly regarded, even though he's having a bit of trouble.
Falls into that Chelsea
the Chelsea mold. Yeah, exactly, the Chelsea mold, and he has to come with great expectations because Chelsea are having an ordinary season. So, yeah, I think maybe United should be coming in for Vlahovic a bit more. But then, if these reports are true, then Ten Hag has to deal with another big character straight away. That'll be interesting to see straight off the bat. But yeah, I guess now would probably be a good time to go into the match and maybe transition to the race a bit further up off the back of it. I thought in the game again. I thought all the things. Well, I want to ask you actually, who in watching the game, who was the better team over the 90 minutes?
Neither. No one clearly was the better. Far out. No one clearly was the better team. From what I saw, and I mentioned earlier that Chelsea looked a lot better when Gallagher came in. Like once those changes came in, once the younger players came in Hall and Gallagher, and I think did someone come in on the right impressed? As well?
Hutchinson, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hutchinson. You
But
did
Gallagher
play.
gave him a massive lift because he started pressing from the midfield.
Yeah, that did help, and it helped after the. It was a fascinating game tactically, actually, this game. But I thought first half Chelsea were far. I thought Chelsea were most impressive in the first half. Actually, I thought they didn't batter City, but I thought they were clearly the better team. City had territory as they normally do, but it was interesting because in that first half, City actually played in the manner. Well, they played with the personnel, I should say, that I would have liked to see out there in Walker and Cancelo coming back. But what I couldn't believe was Walker was playing as the sort of the right centre back. All right, that makes sense. But then Cancelo was playing on the same side of him as a wing back in the 3-4-3, and I'm just like, hold on a minute, why are you doing that? Why are you playing Ake as a wide centre back? Why are you playing Foden as a wing back? And Gundogan I thought was non-existent. De Bruyne was the spaces just appear too big because when I contrast them, and I guess well, I won't lead this to Arsenal because we haven't talked about the game, but I'll contrast City to Arsenal. When I watch Arsenal play, and I think I said it on the last pod, they're more like City of a couple of years ago, where the fullbacks come in nice and tight and they play close to the central midfield, but they don't play as third centre backs or so. They give an angle that is different to that, and then you still have two centre backs behind it rather than three centre backs who are more spread across the pitch, which for me gets the angles of the balls into the midfield wrong. And then we have, I guess, Bernardo Silva, and what Chelsea were doing against City, they were playing the 4-2-3-1, and they were playing with the holding midfielders, I guess you'd say, very split. So they kind of used Haaland as, I thought City's they used his weakness against City. And they said, we're going to leave a big space just in front of Haaland. He can get the ball to feet, but he's not turning. He's not getting in behind. The line, we're not holding the line high enough for him to get in behind. And with the holding midfielders being split, now we're pretty much directly marking Gundogan and De Bruyne, who are the players who in the 3-4-3 sort of, they play as the false wingers, so to speak, and they tuck in and they play sort of closer to Haaland. They were never getting in those central spaces that Chelsea left, except for the one chance, I think you remember, that Haaland sort of had to take really quickly, where Gundogan got it in that hole and then Haaland got on the spin. So they finally decided to play in that space. But you're also asking, Chelsea were also asking those three centre-backs to play the balls into there. And they just couldn't, because what happens is Rodri and Bernardo Silva play sort of central together, and then the angle for the ball to come into them is either coming from wide inside, where they have a big blind spot behind them, or from the central centre back, where they have to play back to goal and their whole back is to the play. So I thought Kovacic, a few occasions, I think, jumped out on that press. I think to your point later in the game, Gallagher jumped out to that press. Maybe he would have been better in that number 10 role to jump out to that press a bit quicker from the start. But yeah, I thought tactically Chelsea got it right against City. They looked to break. I thought Kovacic bossed it for big spells of the first half, although he did his Kovacic thing and lost concentration for a couple of minutes in the middle there. He loves to do that. He's almost perfect, and then he's just like, oh, I've just lost my concentration here for a moment. And it always seems to be like a key one as well.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know if it was in the first half. I think it was in the first half, like, I was like, oh man, he's playing so beautifully, like he's continuing his form from the World Cup. And then he gives a square pass away.
Yeah, I remember.
I'm like, oh shit, man, like, oh man.
But yeah, I thought he was getting the better of De Bruyne, and I thought, I just so much prefer watching De Bruyne sort of with the wingers, how they used to play nice and wide, and then De Bruyne bursting into that space in the channels. I think that's just, for my eye, that's better. Maybe he's getting older, so Pep doesn't want him to do that. Maybe Pep thinks this is the best team for City, but when I look at it, I'm not pleased by it. I don't like Foden as a left wing back. I don't like. Well, I thought Bernardo Silva, actually, with the way Chelsea were playing, had an opportunity to himself maybe run into that space that Chelsea were leaving from a deeper position, but he never wanted to do it. And the other thing as well, City were using Rodri as that fourth centre back against the ball. And then the midfield, I thought, this is why part of the reason, apart from the fact that Kovacic is a really good player, part of the reason he was bossing it is because his resistance was Bernardo Silva and Gundogan. And there's nothing intimidating about that. And when you compare it to what happened in the second half, where Rodri was rightfully moved back into his position as the holding midfielder, and Rico Lewis came on, and for the record, Rico Lewis at the moment overstated. I'm not going to say overrated because I don't know how good he is, but his impact of what he does for the City team is hugely overstated. And I'm very disappointed in managers so far. And I thought Potter might have been maybe aware to this, but why with this, when they want to bring their fullbacks to play into central midfield, where there's so many more pressing cues for me because your back has to be to the play so much more. And then you add on the fact that this guy's young. Why, when he comes on the pitch and tries to fulfill that role, why have managers not seen, hey, if he comes onto the pitch, we have a plan to trap this? Because I can't understand why you wouldn't want the three centre-backs now prodding balls into Rico Lewis where he has his back to the play. If I was an opposition manager, I would be licking my lips. I'd be like, prod those balls away. We are going to make you believe that he is open, and then we are going to jump on him when he has the ball. And let's see how good he really is, because so far I haven't seen anything special. I think he's a good player. I think he looks to apply himself well, and that's why he's getting this chance, because Pep sees that he can apply himself and do the responsibilities and the duties that Pep wants him to. But let's see how well he can play football. And I don't know why opposition managers haven't cottoned on to that. And actually, in this game, it was a tactical advantage for City because Chukwuemeka, I can't say his name properly, but the young man they got from Villa, he got put in the spin cycle in the second half. He had no idea whether to follow Rico Lewis into midfield. And then Riyad Mahrez was obviously on the pitch, so he was getting space to get the ball out there. And now City had a viable avenue to get out, and they were just killing that space. And I believe the goal actually comes from that, apart from obviously as well Ariza Balaga deciding to just sort of sit down rather than just... I think he could have thrown his hat on the ball and it might have stopped it. Like, it's a decent cross, but it was a very, very comfortable save. Like, it just sort of trundled past him. There was no real pace to it. I was just baffled by that decision, and you'd have to be annoyed. And to be fair, like, Cucurella kind of loses his man, but you'd kind of be expecting your goalkeeper to do something better than that. So it's unfortunate to Cucurella on that occasion, but he'll get pinpointed as well. Probably shouldn't have lost his man. So, yeah, I thought they somewhat rectified it in the second half, but I still don't like what I see from City. I'm not saying that Chelsea are better than City, obviously, but I'm saying at the moment what I see from what the managers are trying to do with their teams, I think Potter has better ideas than Guardiola at the moment of what he wants to do with his teams. And I don't know, maybe there's one possibility that comes to my head is, and I can't believe you'd be doing this with the pace that Arsenal are setting, but does Pep not want his Champions League, because we talked about this on the last pod, his Champions League competitors to see the tactics that he'll preferably play in the Champions League? Because if I see this 3-4-3 in the Champions League against top sides when they eventually meet them, I really don't fancy him. I just don't really like the look of it. I think their best way to play is that 4-3-3, and I'm hoping for their sake it's a bit of rope-a-dope, but at the same time, I don't think you're in a position where you can afford to play rope-a-dope with the pace that Arsenal are setting.
Well,
Whoa.
Whoa. Bit of rope-a-dope there with the old camera stand. Man, nothing's going right for me. Got the hiccups, got the camera shaking and wobbling. You know how, like, it's not really a conspiracy theory in regards to, like, is Pep trying to save tactics for these non-important games? Sort of like what I said with the World Cup, like, is a manager trying to, like, was Deschamps trying to save his tactics for the actual final and then deliver something completely different for the final? What if Pep is actually trying to force a new era of tactics, or like revolutionize? You know how football goes in those sort of those eras. So like when he first came in at Barca, it's like this. It was a reintroduction of the 4-3-3. Everyone started playing 4-3-3. And then like national organizations started putting it into their curriculum. Oh, we need to teach the kids 4-3-3. I remember when in Australia they revamped their whole curriculum. Oh, 4-3-3 is the latest craze. Everyone needs to be teaching the kids this. And then when he went to Bayern, then we started seeing those. We started seeing those inverted fullbacks with Philipp Lahm and Alaba. And then we started also seeing that with City as well. We started seeing it more with Fabian Delph, just on the left-hand side when he first came in.
Fabian Delph. Love that. Such a long-lost name.
Yeah, well, I remember he started...
part of that Centurion. He was the left-back for that Centurions team.
There you go. And then we saw it with Zinchenko as well. Now Arsenal's doing that inverted fullback tactic. So is he maybe trying to then introduce the next phase of football tactics where every team is going to start playing a 3-4-3? So is that maybe one thing now? Because I think we mentioned it on the last pod. You asked what signing do City desperately need, and you said left back. I said right back, because with Walker being injured, that forced Cancelo onto the right hand side, and it lost that left hand connection between Cancelo and Foden, which was absolutely devastating. Those two on the same side,
Nothing stopped him from doing that tonight.
Exactly.
Like Cancelo as the left back. Yeah.
Exactly. Nothing stopped him from playing with two wingers with a left and right back behind them, which is what they play best with. So, for instance, Bernardo Silva and Walker on the same side playing one behind the other. That's devastating. Foden and Cancelo, devastating. And Foden works best when he has someone in behind him and supporting him, and someone that can either overlap or underlap. He works best like that, rather than him being actually isolated on that side and being by himself. De Bruyne as well works better when he has two players out on that right hand side, and he's in that channel between their left centre back and their left back, so that he can combine with the centre forward and the right winger and the right back. He works best when he's there, rather than having just one outlet to what Cancelo is playing now, where he's playing pretty much to the entire line, instead of having Cancelo, like Walker playing half the line and Mahrez or Bernardo Silva playing the other half of the line, if you get me. So
yeah,
that's why I ask, like, is Pep maybe trying to force this next evolution or this next phase of tactics?
He can't be, because there's been so many before him who have in recent seasons played 3-4-3. I think the best, most recent, newest exponent, I think, was I'd probably say Conte with Chelsea. The other one that came to my head was Nuno with Wolves when they first came up. I think Nuno's Wolves somewhat. No, I wouldn't say they nearly mastered that 3-4-3. I thought they made it look aesthetically about as good as you could make a 3-4-3 look. And obviously it'd be interesting. I think Chelsea were obviously very good at it and won a title with, I think, 95 points that season or something ridiculous. So, yeah, we've already seen teams play. It's not very Pep-like to not be ahead of the curve, because I feel like the way that, like Arsenal, the way that teams, for my eye, who are playing the best football at the moment play, is to play with four at the back and to not have pretty much any of those four really join in the attacks. It's very much somewhat old school football in terms of if you want a throwback, and I always harp back to this team, but in terms of the inverted fullbacks, I guess The right back, João Santos, could get 4, but that Brazil 58 and 62 team, I think, played very much in what modern football is trying to aspire to be. I think of a team like United, I don't think the fullbacks get all that much forward. They can on occasion, especially you think maybe Luke Shaw, he's a good enough player to do it. But in recent times with Wan-Bissaka, very defensive minded, and City's best teams have been the Centurions for sure, the inverted, like you say, and the ones they're not joining into the attack. They're just very much, we do our defensive work, we do that well. You can play with a Delph or you can play with a Cancelo who are naturally better at linking up the play, so you've got a better ball deliverer, but they're part of a unit that has other players around them, so if there is any defensive liability, they're put into the best position to succeed on that end. So I just don't think the balance is right. I don't see why a team like City are trying to get 3 centre-backs into the team when, in all honesty, the only world-class centre-back they have is Ruben Diaz, who isn't having a great season, whether it be through form or injuries at the moment. So Nathan Ake is very serviceable. I think that's a pretty good partnership. I think if you were to put Laporte there, if you were to put Stones, whoever it's next to Diaz, I think you've got a good 1 and 2. I just think when you look at it, if it goes to a 4-3-3, you look at this team, you look at Edison, you look at, let's say it's Ake, or let's say it's Stones next to Diaz, Walker at fullback, Cancelo at left back, and then you've got Rodri as the holding, and then Bernardo Silva and De Bruyne working off each other with Foden and Riyad Mahrez on the wings. I just think and Haaland up front, of course. So that's just, for me, such a more intimidating team. It's like, how do we break down that defense? Kyle Walker's explosive. How do I touch him in a one-on-one situation? João Cancelo, when he can focus his energy into sort of midfield play and containing from the midfield, has shown himself to be great. And I think your point on left v right back for him is a really good one that we've observed this season. So if Pep is trying that, it's outdated because we've seen that before. And I don't think he is. I think one theory I could give is maybe he sees this City team maybe somewhat not at the end of the cycle, but key positions need regenerating, much like Liverpool. I think Liverpool and City were in very similar positions going into the season. I know it because that's the way we talked about it. And obviously Haaland coming in has obviously had a bigger impact than Darwin coming in, and it'd be unfair to say it's all because of Haaland where City are in the table, but a lot of it is due to Haaland. He scored 20 goals. I know De Bruyne has been a big factor, and De Bruyne will always be a big factor in that. But yeah, but those two together, I think, are the main reason they are where they are. And I don't think the system's working perfectly. I think Bernardo Silva might have had his head turned in the summer. He's not playing to the same level as last season. Kyle Walker can't get there, whether it be through injuries or just because he's not playing very well. Cancelo obviously hasn't been to his level. So maybe just being pushed that last season, getting to the Champions League semi-finals, getting to that Premier League title in the style that they did, much like Liverpool, playing nearly as many games as Liverpool, pushing themselves in nearly every competition. I think maybe they were at the same stage, and key areas of them, Pep maybe feels need a bit more compensation, so he wants to go maybe slightly more negative, definitely in terms of personnel, in terms of what he's picking, but I would argue that defensively they look more solid in the old ways. And yeah, just the way they're playing, I can't see why he's doing it other than maybe that reason or rope-a-dope. But yeah, he's not innovating anything for me. And I personally am hoping that we go away from 3-4-3s very soon, because I think they themselves as a system is a little bit outdated for me.
Well, it could be one of two things. Either Pep's ego in saying, I can make the 3-4-3 work and I can get others to follow.
It does work. Like, I'm not saying it never works. Like, don't get me wrong there. And City, to be fair, came away from Stamford Bridge with a 1-0 win. We're talking about them like they're in a crisis. They just picked up a 1-0 win at Stamford Bridge. So I got to point that out.
Yeah. So it's either that or it's one of three things. So it's that, your point that maybe he's trying to save tactics for the Champions League. But the thing is, with the Champions League, all right, they don't really have a tough opponent in the round of 16 from memory. I can't remember who exactly it is. I don't know if you can, but they don't have like a big dog. They don't have like a Bayern or a PSG or someone. They have one of the minnows, you'd say.
Yeah.
So even if they're gonna reveal it for the round of 16 or the quarters at the earliest, I'd say, based on the teams that are left. So I can't really buy into that theory that he's trying to save.
Yeah, me neither.
Save the and also on that point, if he's having them playing 3-4-3 for so long to get them adjusted to 3-4-3, then when he reverts back to the 4-3-3, players might find it once again a struggle to reorganize themselves back into the old system, considering they've been playing a new system for so long. So I
they have Leipzig, by the way.
Yeah, which it's a bit of a.
If they play 3-4-3, that will play into Leipzig's hands.
It's a bit of a banana skin.
That 4-2-3-1, and if they could keep, I think Konrad Laimer. I think the talk is he's going to Bayern, so that'll be a big loss in midfield. But I don't think Guardiola will go anywhere in January, and Cuckoo we know isn't going anywhere until the end of the season. So City aren't playing well. That could be a banana skin, no doubt. And the fun thing is we get to see Leipzig up against Bayern as the very first game back in the Bundesliga when that does come back. So I think they're the two going into the break. They were the two best teams in Germany. So yeah, that'll be fun. But it's a banana skin.
Yeah,
in that round of 16 if City aren't playing well.
But the third point would be that maybe he's just sticking to this system to get them to, I guess, on your point in regards to the passing angles and the passing lanes, to get them acclimatized so that it becomes second nature to know where players will be in certain positions. That if Walker gets injured once again, he needs to then go back to this because he doesn't have a reliable left back and right back, because he's going to be forced to play Cancelo on the right hand side anyway. So maybe that's the reason why for this big game he wanted to see how they do playing a 3-4-3 in this big game where Cancelo's still on that right hand side. So I imagine that it's more I imagine that's the reason why he stuck to the 3-4-3 and stuck to Cancelo playing on the right, even though Walker was back.
That's an interesting point. I think that's a good point as well. It could in this big game, because if you think probably of a team that have given, and probably a manager that has given Pep some troubles, it's probably Conte, especially with Spurs. And Spurs obviously play, well, you can call it 3-4-3. It's more like a 5-4-1 when they play City. Even Atletico, you think, but the Atletico went 5-5-0, which was a bit crazy. But even that gave him problems. So maybe that is the thinking. It's specific to what maybe he's expecting other managers to have seen as a City weakness against a certain formation. So that is an interesting point. But all we can do is speculate on what's going on. But all I know is, when you have Cancelo and Walker in the same team, don't play them on the same side for me. But another interesting question just before we leave this game, and it might segue to another, probably not, because their result was good for them, Tottenham, but like it didn't. It was against Palace. We might talk about it, we might not. But in this game, I was thinking with Chelsea's tactics, the way they split open that midfield and just left all that space, would I be having more fun from a footballing perspective and this is a big call given how well he's done this season, but would I be having more fun watching Harry Kane play for this City team over Erling Haaland? I'm interested to get your take on what you'd be having more fun, you think, to be watching. Don't think about like longevity, don't think about long-term plans, just now.
Just this season in isolation.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Just because they've reverted to the 3-4-3, so they don't have Mahrez on that right wing cutting in. They don't have Foden on that left wing either going to the line or cutting in. So no, I don't think so, because they're not they're not. They're right now the focal point is Haaland, and I think with Cancelo playing as I guess you'd say a right wing back, and Foden playing as a left wing back, you're not getting those same runs or deliveries that you get in a 4-3-3, where Kane coming into the middle would benefit the wingers.
But I also think Pep's smart enough they'd be playing in a way that played to Kane's strengths, and I just thought that Chelsea game was an indication that I had Haaland as the best player in the world going into the World Cup, and I guess that's on form, and I guess that's deserved on form. But I think when I compare Kane and Haaland, Kane just shows me that there's still a lot of strings to his bow that he needs to add in Erling Haaland, because I think Chelsea did very well with that tactic, because I don't think his link-up play, and look, he's 21, 22. I'm not crucifying him for this, but I'm just saying he has so many years to get better. And he has clear improvements to make, and I think that's probably the clearest one in terms of that link-up play, because I think if teams were switched on watching what Chelsea did, I think more teams will take that blueprint and say, we're not going to let De Bruyne create anything in between the lines. We're not going to let Gundogan or Bernardo Silva or whoever else is playing between the lines. But this guy, he can pick up the ball in between the lines. We're not letting him in behind. That's the main thing. And so it's somewhat pick your poison, because maybe he could spray the ball out wide and they could get... And obviously with his height, that's always a danger. But I just think there was a game plan there. Can we make him link up? And if you're never using that game plan if it's Harry Kane, because he can just do so much more in those spaces. He can create so much more. So yeah, maybe I'm a bit overzealous, but it just shows that Haaland still has years and ways, I think, maybe to go to get to that level, which is fair enough, because Harry Kane is now, 2 goals away from getting to 200 in the Premier League. It's just staggering what he's doing this season. He has been so unbelievably good, pretty much, especially when you think of Son's drop-off. You think of how much influence and how much his goals have meant to Tottenham. He's pretty much the main reason why they are where they are. There's been a few other good pieces, but he's been the ever present. And yeah, I just think to my eye, aesthetically, I think City would have maybe more bows to their strings to their bow if they had Harry Kane instead of Haaland. But Haaland's bloody 22 years old and got so long, and he scored 20 Premier League goals already. So I don't want to sound like I'm criticising.
You know what though? One thought that I did have and we'll try to finish with this thought and getting your opinion. And since you brought it up though as well, in this game I was thinking, man, Haaland actually looks pretty one-dimensional. Like, he only has that to his game where he should be utilized as the final ball played to player rather than a link-up player, because he hasn't shown that he can do that. Like, Eddie Nketiah has been linking up better than Haaland.
Eddie Nketiah, hot take. That is for the talk. Eddie Nketiah is better than Erling Haaland. You heard it here first.
At link-up play. Prove me wrong. Yeah,
no.
We'll
talk about that.
So that's what I came away thinking in this Chelsea. I'm like, if he doesn't have, if he comes up against an experienced defender in the form of Virgil van Dijk, in the form of Thiago Silva, he's not going to have the same luxuries of being on the end of, some beautiful passes, whether it's to his feet or through to him or across the box. And he's going to be forced to link up. And when he's forced to link up, he's, at least this season on 2 occasions that I can remember, against Liverpool and now Chelsea, he's been exposed.
Yeah, he's not terrible, and he's got the ability to get better, but he's not there yet. It's definitely the weakest part of his game. So basically what we're saying is Erling Haaland is very one-dimensional, but that one dimension happens
is
to
fantastic.
It happens to be all the attributes that allow you to get 20 goals at this point of the season already. In the
21, isn't it?
21
21.
even. Oh my
But-
god, it's scary thought.
We'll
We're
finish.
picking him to pieces already.
We'll finish on this before we move on to the Arsenal Newcastle game. But Erling Haaland, a couple of pods ago, I said, go look at some Olivier Giroud footage, mate. Go look at some Olivier Giroud footage. Learn how to link up. Learn how to play against Van Dijk. Up your game. Up your game, son.
Oh, I love that. The hiccups haven't stopped you from getting those TikTok videos, the TikTok videos out there. Just quickly before we go to the other big game, Spurs, are you back in or you're still out after what they did to Palace? I don't think we need huge in-depth analysis of this.
Let me just have a look at the table and then, because they won 4-0 against Palace.
I think they're two points behind Newcastle, who we've been raving about, and I think they're that close to them on the table.
Yeah,
now, so.
2 points behind Newcastle.
Yeah.
I need to see how they're playing against Arsenal in 2 weeks. No, next week. Next week, yeah. I need to see how they play against Arsenal next week, because that will be more telling when they're facing a top 6 team, especially a team that's at the top of the table now. That's actually a top 2 team, not a top 6 team.
If we know, I actually don't take much stock in those performances for Tottenham, because if we appear to know much about Tottenham, it's that they normally play quite well against teams who are going to look to come onto them. Now, they're playing that game at home, so maybe they need to take the initiative a bit more, which sort of helps Arsenal. But you would normally expect Tottenham to turn up for those games against the big teams. It's normally against the smaller teams that they seem to struggle. But look, again, in this
they've
first
struggled
half,
against the top teams as well. They struggled against. They lost to United. They lost to Newcastle. They lost to Arsenal. Obviously, they scraped back against Liverpool.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. It's lazy on my part, because this season they haven't shown that characteristic in their game.
How'd they go against City?
So. They haven't played them yet, or
I don't know.
That one was postponed because of the Queen's funeral, I think, maybe.
I think so. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because we're looking forward to that game.
We did a preview of it. Yeah.
Yeah, Tottenham were coming in with a bit of form, but yeah, I thought they were unconvincing, even though it was 4-0. That first half, they could have been a goal down, but like I said, they're at the place in their table, and then if they knock Arsenal off this weekend, then all of a sudden
that
they're
opens
looking up rather than down.
Everything. It opens up the title race. It opens up top 4 race even more. Yeah, this fixture has the next 2 fixtures for Arsenal have huge implications, not just for them.
No,
but for
all 3, and we should we should talk about the one that's just been.
Well,
3 in a row.
Yeah, wait, what do you mean the one that's just been?
Against Newcastle.
3 in a row,
just third. As in 3 in a row, as in they've got Newcastle, then they've got Tottenham, then they've got United consecutively, don't they?
Okay, so that's what you mean. Yeah, look, as the neutral, take it away, son. And as the man who's not hiccuping.
Yeah, fair enough. But I did, because you're the Arsenal supporter, I wanted to ask you, did you enjoy Andy Mateo Lahoz' performance as referee in this game?
Dude, the referee was shit. Like, and I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that because, like, I just felt like his refereeing all round, like for both teams, was really poor. And I think the occasion just got like they probably thought, oh, it's Arsenal and Newcastle. Like they're probably thinking it's Newcastle from like last season or the season before. But no, this is a top 4 Newcastle. Like this is supposed to be third in the middle of the season, and you're giving it to this shit ass ref instead of a ref that's experienced at refereeing, like, you know, between big teams. Like,
got to get that experience somewhere.
Give it to him as like the linesman or the 4th official, not bloody the main man in the middle of the pitch.
Lead officials don't do assistant work.
No, don't give him this shit. Like, I did think it was poor, and he got some decisions wrong. I don't think he necessarily got any decisions wrong. I don't think there was any big decisions for Newcastle that he got wrong, but probably smaller decisions that he got wrong for them.
Here's the segue, isn't it? Because I don't know if you saw Arteta's quotes after, but
I saw
scandalous. Two scandalous.
I don't think there was two. I thought there was one that definitely was. I don't know if it. I need to look up the exact definition of scandalous, but scandalous for me, it's like, it's borderline like conspiracy theory, like that. It's in that sort of bracket. So, and like, scandalous would imply that the ref's been paid off for me, which I don't think, or I don't hope it's the case. But like, it's not Italy at the end of the day. It's England. Definitely he got the one wrong on Gabriel. That one, I don't know why VAR didn't look at that, because Gary Neville. I didn't see. Like, when I was watching it, I didn't see in that. I didn't really cast a detailed eye on it. I'm just like, he's really like pulling his shirt back and holding him. Like, how is this not being given as a penalty? And Gary Neville's like, yeah, like the Arsenal crest was like over his shoulder. Like, that's how much he was pulling his shirt back by. Like, it wasn't just like, sort of tug like this. It was like that. So it's like, okay, if that's the case, it's like, how is this not being thrown back to VAR? Like for in the first half, when Dan Burn had on a Newcastle free kick, when Dan Burn had not an altercation, it wasn't a clash, it was a battle. A battle with Gabriel, that was thrown to VAR. How is that being thrown to VAR, but then this isn't?
You'd think that it was, or you just think that they didn't want to overturn the decision, to be quite honest.
But
I
don't think it was. Because it comes up that VR is actually checking it. Like, because they came up that it was actually checking the one on the Newcastle free kick, but it didn't come up at all that it was checking the Arsenal free kick one. So, like, what gives there? The second one, the handball right at the end. I don't know, because he's sliding in and like when you're sliding in and his arm isn't like out here, it's more here, and like your body positioning and that's a tough one for me. I don't think I think it was more ball to arm rather than. But then also you have to consider how much of an advantage did Newcastle gain from it, because you need to. I believe that handballs need to be contextualized, and you need to, sort of like with LBWs in cricket, you need to see where the flight of the ball would go if it didn't hit the hand. So if the ball was going to go to an Arsenal player, it should be given.
I totally agree. Not even an Arsenal player, just a sort of dangerous area. Just sort of, I think you have to gain an advantage as the defender if it's not deliberate handball. Deliberate handball is handball anyway. But I think for incidental handball, you need to gain an advantage. So that ball needs to be a shot on target, or it needs to be a ball
or a cutback.
Yeah, a ball into a dangerous area. Yeah. My only thing is, I don't think Newcastle really gained an advantage from it brushing his hand. If it hits his hand and the ball completely
hit his hand.
Yeah, but like it still travelled on that. It was like a slightly different path, but it still went into the box. I think if it like hits the hand and like drops dead, I know this is a grey area, but like I think it is an advantage. If the ball is still in dispute after it's left his hand, I think like you're not really gaining that much of an advantage.
Instead of the ball travelling across the 6-yard line,
it was kind of a cutback because he was like.
It got diverted back to the 18-yard line or towards that direction. So the ball completely changed direction.
But there's no guarantee that ball's going to Arsenal anyway. I just think because it's still travelling that way, I think it's still in dispute either way. So I don't know. That one's like a grey area. I get it. But I think, like, how much of an advantage are you getting if you're Jacob Murphy by doing that? Like, none at all. And, like, you don't even know that you're doing it to the point as well. It's just incredibly harsh to try and penalise that. I mean, that's where...
I think they, like I said, I think they need to be contextualized similar to an LBW, where you need to look at where the ball would have travelled to if it wasn't a handball, and the technology's there. Like they like.
Yeah.
So why can't they look at that and contextualize it a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think the main points of this game, and we'll kind of move away from referees.
Yeah, let's move away from refereeing. But you know what? Before we get into like the game and all that stuff, but like, you know what? It was actually a pretty entertaining game. Like, despite it being 0-0, it was actually really entertaining.
I wanted to move off because for me the referee is like the center of a mind map of this game. So the place that I want to move to is obviously I quoted him, Arteta, scandalous. Just a quick point. Just makes himself so dislikable. He's so dislikable for opposition fans. I know Arsenal fans love him, and they brought you guys to this point. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, why would you love a manager who's got your team playing this way? Man, he's such a dislikable character as a manager. My God. And I don't think it's any surprise.
Well, Klopp is really dislikable for me.
That's fine.
At times.
That's fine. But the thing that I look at more than our opinions as sort of supporters is I look at the sort of the way that Arteta rubs up the other managers the wrong way. And that's how I sort of get my indication that, man, he's properly dislikable. He even riled up Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe, I don't think would ever really say a word to another manager. He even got him riled up for some reason. But I thought Arteta I'll bring it both sides of the coin with this, but obviously dislikable to be going in as hard as he does in post-match interviews with like comments like scandalous. I think it's just a bit strong. A bit petulant, whatever, it is what it is. He's heated after the game. Arsenal fans like it, so that's the main thing, I guess. But then I thought I saw as well the truthful side of something that he said, which was, what I thought was right, in that I think the question was, do you think other teams will come with this blueprint to play the way that Newcastle wanted to play? And Arteta butted in on Jeff Shrews and said Newcastle didn't want to play this way. We made them play this way, and I thought he was spot on with that because I thought in the footballing sense of this game, Arsenal were far and away the superior team. They made Newcastle really cling on for dear life, and I thought they outplayed them in the footballing sense. I thought in the first 20 minutes, and that was where Newcastle probably suffered their most. Newcastle were trying to play. Newcastle were trying to play their patterns. There was a few times that they got out past the Arsenal counter press, but that Arsenal counter press is suffocating. It's one of the best containment jobs I've seen in recent years, and I keep having to make the comparison, but it reminds me to early Guardiola City teams. Not obviously the first season where Guardiola struggled, but the second and third where City were irrepressible, finishing on 100 points and then 98 points in consecutive seasons. And obviously Arteta's worked with Guardiola during that time, so I think it's no surprise to see that style of play, and I think Arsenal, I'm not going to put them in the Centurion category or even that 98-point team just yet. But the way they look aesthetically, my God, they're strangling in that counter press. It's, for me, easily, that containing play is easily their best part of their play and the main reason why they are where they are in the table, amongst a lot of things, to be fair. But yeah, in the footballing sense, I thought. But and credit Don Hutchinson. I think I've had a go at him before. But in this game, I thought when he used the words streetwise to sum up Newcastle, I thought it was spot on. And I didn't expect that from Newcastle, a team who haven't been here before, haven't done that before. I know that they've brought in one of the key pieces in Kieran Trippier, who I think has just had a massive impact on that team, maybe that whole club. The way he's come in, the way he's been so professional, his leadership ability, I think has been sensational. And I know I'm not privy to what goes on day in, day out, but just what you can see, what you can observe on the screen, I think it's pretty obvious to see. He never gets too high, never gets too low, and I think he imparts that on his teammates. And it's coming from a genuine place because he has worked at Atletico Madrid. He has worked with the top manager in Diego Simeone. So even Tottenham when they were having their good run under Pochettino. So he does have that experience that he can help the other guys on the team with. But yeah, I thought Newcastle showed all of those things in the time wasting. I know Arteta wasn't happy with how long of actual game time was played. But there was a shift from 25 minutes when Newcastle, to show that they were streetwise, I think, they saw they were getting outplayed football-wise, but then they also saw they had a referee who was going to be very strict and give out a lot of yellow cards. And from that point, they just made that game hell. They made it an Atletico game. They made it scrappy. We'll go down. We'll compartmentalise the game. We'll not allow Arsenal to have any rhythm in this game. And Arsenal got a little bit frustrated. And it's no surprise to see that when you see how the manager acts. I don't want to crucify Arteta for that, but I am saying, like, obviously that intensity is a good thing at times, but when a team comes in with that game plan and does that, and again, it wasn't their game plan, but when they had the streetwiseness, I guess to say, to do that when they knew they were suffering in the game, I thought was commendable from Newcastle. I thought that point was it was a really good game, to your point. It was a really entertaining game, even though it was so stop-start. And I thought we saw a team perform kind of old school, kind of 10 years ago in Newcastle in the way they defended for that point. I don't think you see many teams defend like that anymore, and that was up against a really good Arsenal team. But they defended with their lives, and I thought, while Arsenal in the footballing sense deserved all 3 points, Newcastle did not deserve to lose the game for the application they showed in the game and their ability to think on the fly and change course during the game to really earn that point.
You know, a couple of points, and I'll try. I think I agree with some of what you said. I think it was around that 20-minute mark, 25-minute mark, where Dan Burn gets absolutely skinned by Saka. And did you notice that after that,
Joelinton came back, Willock came back, it was a triangle around him every time.
They were coming back every single time Saka got the ball. They didn't leave Dan Burn isolated anymore after that. So like that, I think that moment they realized, shit, we need to start working for our left back.
Yeah, no,
and that's when the things changed.
Yeah, and it goes into that, and then they adjust on the fly to that 4-5-1 rather than a 4-3-3. My question off the back of that is, who is Arsenal's best player at the moment? This season, whatever you've seen.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a question.
That's a tough one, because it's like...
For me, it's easy, though. I think it's easy for me.
You think it's Saka?
I think I've got it. Yeah, I think I've got Saka. I know it was Dan Burn, and I know Martinelli had Trippier on the other side, and I'm not diminishing Martinelli. I think it's a little close between them, but I think Saka's ability to draw that kind of Saka's gravity.
Yeah, Saka draws.
For me more
I've seen Saka get double and triple teamed a lot more, which then allows Martinelli to have space on that on our left hand side, and that's probably why Jesus. If you look at, I saw Jesus, a video by Tifo Football, and like they showed Jesus's heat map, and he plays a lot more on Martinelli's side, and like you see that anyway, like using the eye, but also using the heat map, you're like, okay, yeah, he plays a lot more there. He does obviously play on Saka's side as well, but I guess Arteta and Arsenal have seen, okay, let's allow them to throw 2-3 players to Saka, and that will then leave space on that left hand side. And similar to Chelsea under Mourinho when Hazard was there.
Hazard, Ivanovic on the other side.
Yeah, and create those triangles between the three on the left hand side. So there's that too. To your point on the trying to like the shift and the streetwise shift. You know what I did notice around the 40-minute mark, Arsenal just lost their heads a little bit for 5 minutes. There was also, I think, a chance by Newcastle around that time as well. And then there was 2 yellow cards given to Arsenal players as well, I think, in that 5 minute spell. And I'm just like, shit, these guys are losing their heads. They need to keep it 0-0 and get into the change room as quick as possible for Arteta to calm them down. Because I haven't seen that this season, where they just sort of lose their heads because a team is frustrating them so much. Like, they didn't, like, you might be able to point to, for instance, to United, but I don't think they lost their heads because they were frustrated. They lost their heads because they were naive, and because they were obviously missing Partey as well. So there was a little bit of inexperience there, in terms of positional sense. But this was like, okay, Xhaka's losing his head, Partey's losing his head. Like, God, they need to keep it tight and get into the change room as quick as possible, because Newcastle are starting to get into their heads, and this could get ugly real soon. And if Newcastle got a goal just before halftime, it probably would have ended up being 2-0 or even 3-0 for Newcastle, because Arsenal would have then been chasing the game and throwing more players forward.
That's an interesting point, especially the way we've seen them chase games in the past, and go really gung-ho so quick.
Yeah, and also to your point on the blueprint, I mentioned it, I think, when we played Newcastle, and then also Southampton second half. So Newcastle second half, Southampton second half, where the passing lanes and the suffocating of Odegaard started to occur. And I said that I believe that it might have been Odegaard possibly sort of falling back or like regressing into the shadows because he can't handle the pressure. And I sort of mentioned that to De Bruyne and like going hiding. And I've seen De Bruyne go hiding, but I don't think now, after seeing this game, I don't think that's the case. I think it's more that teams are starting to figure Odegaard's the most creative out of those 3 in the midfield. If we can crowd him and cut off the passing lanes to him and frustrate him, the play starts to break down a little bit. And you did see that Odegaard could not impose himself on the game, not to any fault of his own, but more to the tactics that Newcastle employed. And yeah, like he just couldn't control the game like he usually does against slightly inferior. Not saying that he plays better against inferior opposition. I think a lot of great players naturally play better against inferior opposition. But I think when the tactics are actually centered around Odegaard, there's not much you can really do when you have 2 or 3 players always around you. And like Saka always have two or three players around him. So all he can really do is draw them in and then pass the ball back into the midfield.
Well, that's the point as well. They both play on the same side.
Yeah,
so if Saka has 3 players around him, Odegaard's running into that problem.
They can quickly transition to Odegaard when Saka delivers the ball to Odegaard, and then Odegaard can find it difficult to switch the play and recycle the ball over to the left-hand side. So Saka's pass either has to go back to Ben White or Saka has to look to Partey. So completely ignore Odegaard. And then Partey's the one that has to play it through.
Well, you know what Odegaard was doing earlier in the season as well? He was making those De Bruyne-like runs in between the centre-back and the full-back when they'd get sucked out to Saka. So we didn't see too much of that in this game. And I think in terms of the blueprint, the first point is if this is potentially a blueprint for other teams to go and play against Arsenal, I think it's a great indication of where Arsenal are. Because if teams are now starting to go up against you and sit in a low block and let you have all of the territory, yes, there might be problems that come with that, but it means that in terms of Arsenal's development, they're perfectly on the right track, maybe ahead of schedule, in fact, that they can dominate games against the third-place team in the league who have been fantastic this season. And again, I'll harpen back to Arteta's point. I don't think Newcastle wanted to play like that. They wanted to play a game. They wanted to play the 4-3-3, but Arsenal made them play like that. So if teams believe that that's the way to go and get points against Newcastle, then that's a good sign against Arsenal, then that's a good sign for Arsenal. But I want to say that I believe that the better blueprint is actually to make the game more open. And while Newcastle chose to go into a 4-5-1, and probably rightly so because they get a point in a game where Arsenal were playing very well, I think that if I was manager, I might have had a temptation, just given as how well we are doing as Newcastle this season, to maybe bring on Sam Maximan for Willock and play and double down on more the 4-3-3, but have to stretch Ben White to play more as an out-and-out right back. Because I think if you can get Ben White and if they play Zinchenko, if you can get those two having to defend as fullbacks in 1v1 situations, I think that's a good sign for you as an opposition. And then if they have to get stretched out to touchlines, that whole structure of why Arsenal are so good at containing the play is no longer there, because now these players have been drawn out to touchlines. They're not sitting next to Thomas Partey. And I also think the profile of the Arsenal squad, barring probably three key positions in Partey and the two centre-backs, kind of lacks physicality. They're all hungry, which is great. They're all sharp, they're agile, they're quick. But if you can make the game played in spaces, much like we saw Newcastle against City in the game at St James's Park earlier in the season, and especially a team like Newcastle, they have a physical advantage on nearly every team in the league in terms of they're all big lads, long strides. If they're playing in spaces, I fancy them physically to get the better of. They did it against City, and City player profiles are pretty similar to Arsenal, I would say. Except now they have Erling Haaland up front, who kind of changes that front line. But so I think maybe the better blueprint, especially if you've got a team equipped to go at Arsenal, I'd rather see them maybe go for it a bit more and stretch that Arsenal shape out of position a little bit. Especially, you got to disrupt the way they contain you deep in your half, because that shape and the way they counter press and the pressure they put on straight away to never let you out. Like I keep saying, is for me their greatest tactical strength this season.
I think, like I said, I think the blueprint is. I think Southampton showed it and Leeds showed it. I don't think Newcastle really showed the blueprint of how to stop Arsenal. I thought that Southampton's and Leeds' blueprint was better to how to stop Arsenal, because Arsenal against Newcastle, they still dominated the game, I felt, whereas they struggled against Leeds and Southampton.
But I would say that's more on Arsenal. I thought they came into this game with a real intensity. Those two games that you're referring to, I thought they lacked that intensity.
Yeah, they started
particularly second half against Southampton.
Yeah, or both second halves.
Yeah.
I do want to also ask, did you think... I felt around the 60, 65-minute mark, I'm like, okay, bring Zinchenko off for Tierney, because then that will allow Martinelli to start playing more centrally and allow an overlapping fullback to take Trippier, to isolate Trippier in 2v1s instead of 1v1s. So, and because Zinchenko only started, he was never making those overlapping runs on Martinelli, and I felt that was lacking, and that would have opened the space up more between Trippier and the centre back.
My only question is who now fulfills Zinchenko's role when
Xhaka.
You guys have the ball into.
Xhaka starts playing a little bit more, because Xhaka actually, when Zinchenko comes into the middle, Xhaka actually goes out wide into left back, but Xhaka isn't going to be overlapping. Yeah, but you know what happens if Zinchenko's there? Xhaka has another player next to him. It might be harsh to say because he's given us half a season of really good play, but let's not forget the Xhaka's bad old days where he had to play in a more withdrawn role and where he had to play as more of that guy who had to be disciplined and who had to put in his, I wouldn't say defensive work. He's doing his defensive work, but he's doing it higher up the pitch now because of where he plays.
And if he does have to drop into left back, he's still got Zinchenko there, so there's still numerical advantage. So I thought, given that it was still 0-0, given you would still be worried of Almiron on the break, Callum Wilson on the break, maybe if Joel Inter goes out there or Jacob Murphy comes on, I just still think that Arteta doesn't really trust Xhaka to do that role in this game. I think maybe if they had to chase it, you could look at doing something like that, but I still think he wanted to keep that structure behind the ball intact, and he didn't trust Xhaka being the man to do that. He trusts Zinchenko more, so yeah, and I think Xhaka's so much more effective now higher up the pitch, where his mistakes are so much less risky, I guess, and he doesn't make that many of them anymore. So maybe I'm saying maybe you could trust him in that position. So maybe it was worth looking at. But my inclination as to why he didn't do it is that he still doesn't trust Xhaka to fulfill that crucial role in what Arsenal do.
Possibly, but I still think it would have. I think he's been playing well enough.
I agree with your tactical points. It's just a trust thing.
Yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know. It could be the other reason, but he trusts him enough to play him in every single. I think he's played like every single game this season, and he's been playing him. He's taken Ødegaard, the captain, out of games, but still played Xhaka. Like Xhaka's played Europa League games as well, whereas Ødegaard's been rested. So like he trusts Xhaka more than Ødegaard in that sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And those Europa League games would have given a good opportunity to try something like that as well. So yeah, I think maybe that's something they could add to their pardon the pun, their arsenal.
Yeah.
Something to look for.
And I did mention earlier, Eddie Nketiah. Also, all right. So two things on that: the tactic on Eddie Nketiah, where he was actually followed by the centre back all the way, like to the defensive edge of the centre circle when Eddie Nketiah would try to link up with his midfield or with his centre backs. And that's also one thing as well that City don't do. They don't play direct balls from the centre backs to Haaland that actually Arsenal do. That's an added like bow to your string, as you would say, that Arsenal have over City. Like, why hasn't Pep been doing that with such a big, imposing physical presence up front? Why don't City play the direct balls from the centre back to Haaland? Like, for instance, I used to do that when I was playing. I'd be picking up balls from the centre back as the centre forward. Arsenal have it. They do it with Jesus. They've been doing it with Nketiah. Nketiah over the past 3 games has shown that he is capable of doing it. His touch has improved a lot. But that's one thing that I guess City could start to implement with Haaland. Maybe he doesn't trust him enough. Maybe he doesn't want him coming that deep. Maybe he wants him playing up more higher up the pitch so that he's actually there in and around the box when the ball does come. Because that's one thing I guess that if Nketiah or Jesus are coming so deep, then that's another thing as well with the formation. If Jesus or Nketiah come that deep, it allows space in behind for Martinelli and Saka to run through. 4-3-3 allows that. 3-4-3 doesn't really. So yeah, that
it could. It just
but
depends on your profile of the wide players. But their profile is central midfield or attacking midfield.
So, what are your thoughts then on, I guess, how Nketiah has been playing? Are you starting to slowly eat some humble pie?
Well, I must say that he's playing very well.
Because I thought there was actually a job done on him this game as well. Like there was clear instructions of what to do on him. And he only really had one. I felt like he did the most that he could have with that one chance he got with that the strike with the left foot. Like he put it wide enough for the keeper to ask a very big question of the keeper, and the keeper answered it because the keeper did have to outstretch his left foot from memory. So he did the best that he could have with his weaker foot as well.
Yeah, no, Nick Pope's fantastic, and he deserves a lot of credit for what Newcastle are doing, and so does Sven Botman is one that we haven't mentioned much, but he's doing a very good job at centre-back as well. The whole unit's doing a fantastic job, but yeah, no, and Nketiah is playing. He is playing well. I don't want to sound sort of what's the word?
Hater?
Snarky, I guess. I don't want to sound snarky and say, look, for me, it's the three that play behind him that help him look so good, but that's the case for anyone. Haaland, look who he has playing behind him, so they obviously help him make it look as good as he does. So I do think Martinelli, Odegaard, and Saka are some of the best players that Arsenal have. You'd probably put Partey in there and Saliba
Jesus.
as key. And Jesus when he's back, obviously, but that's the only reason that Nketiah's in there. But yeah, I think Martinelli, Saka, and Odegaard, the way he's playing in particular, that really helps to be a part of a front four like that. But he is showing that he's clever enough to pick up the positions that the other players leave. He's clever enough to link up the play. He's shown somewhat an eye for goal. Let's see if it continues. But like you said, he did pretty well with that chance. A little bit unlucky not to score.
I thought it was more of a right. Nketiah of last season or even the season before, you would be saying he would have hit the ball so poorly that you would have said that is a poor shot. Whereas now you're actually saying it's a great save. So
yeah, no, it was a great save, and yeah, I just think he's playing well. He's far exceeding my expectations, but I will also say that when you get paid £100,000 a week and you put up a fight for your contract, when you are given the chance to be an able deputy, do it. And he is doing it. So he's backing up his wages, much like another guy who I will appear to be wrong on in Marcus Rashford, who for years there was overpaid, but now he looks like a £250,000 a week player. So, and I think the bigger point as well on players like that for me are the good job that coaches are doing with these players. It's not traditional, the management types. These guys, the Ten Hag and the Arteta types and the Eddie Howe types, for me, are coaches. They're guys who work with players individually. The staff, they encourage the staff to work with these players individually, and they just get the best out of these players. They get them to their maximum, and I think we're seeing that you look at an Almiron, you look at Nketiah, and I can't remember what the last example I showed, but like I think the bigger picture. Yeah, Joelinton. Yeah, Newcastle. You can almost look at the whole team, and Arsenal to an extent, you could almost look at the whole team, and United. That was the other one I was using. Like Luke Shaw looks fantastic now. Marcus Rashford looks fantastic now. Martial's playing well, and yeah, I guess. Do you have anything more on
one
Arsenal?
thing? All right, so I'm not sure. I don't think I said it last season, but I was thinking it last season, especially after we faced Liverpool in the second half of the season, and also the performance that we put in against Man City, despite losing both games. But watching those two games, and I was sort of harping on about the fact that Arsenal looked to be closing the gap on City and Newcastle, but the thing is that they can't sustain it for the entire 90 minutes. They can do it for 45, they can do it for 60 minutes, they can't do it for the entire 90. That was my point last season. And also the point was that they don't have the bench or the squad to sustain it for an entire season either. This season, the bench has improved a little bit, but the bench has improved more from a defensive standpoint. So you have Tierney that can come on, who's a not like-for-like replacement, but quality-for-quality replacement with Zinchenko. Offers different qualities, but in the terms of level of player, I'd say they're the same or similar level, but different qualities in terms of what you'd expect from them, or different instructions that you'd give them. Tomiyasu for Ben White, same quality of player. But then things start to slowly break down when you go into the midfield. Like, who comes in for Odegaard? Maybe Vieira? Yeah, like he still needs to show himself. Who comes in for Partey? Lokonga? He still needs to show himself, still needs to adjust, still needs to grow. Who comes in for Xhaka? Actually, no one. And then up front, with the three, Nketiah has come in for Jesus. He's shown that he can be a replacement, but he offers different, not quality for quality in terms of replacement, but he's showing that he can put in a shift.
He's able. Yeah.
Yeah. But then who comes in for Martinelli? Who comes in for Saka? They signed Marquinhos, who's a 19-year-old. In the Europa League, he's looked like he's shown some talent and some that he can put in a shift. He looks very good, but still, he needs to develop. He needs to get adjusted to England. Needs to get adjusted to the team, to the language. I was thinking last season, after watching those games against Liverpool and City, I was like, this team, what Arteta is building, this starting 11 has the potential to go invincible. The way they play and the way that they're trying to get to that level to play. This season has
invincible. Let's go.
I should have put my neck out on the line last season. And obviously
they've already lost that one.
I know. I should have put my neck out on the line last season, where I should have said that I can see the potential for them to go invincible in 2 or 3 seasons' time if they make the right signings to improve the team. This season, they went 10 games unbeaten before they finally lost to United. But they're showing that they have the potential to do it. And the team is young enough to stay together for the next 3, 4, 5 seasons to do that. So I'm gonna stick my neck out on the line now. I should have done it last season before they're putting in this great of a performance this season, because then I would have been more around. It would have been Nostradamus Nev strikes again. Nevstradamus. But I'm gonna say it now. I can see the potential for them to go invincible next season, so long as they can add 1 or 2 more additions to the midfield and to the forward line. Because if you look at City, for instance, they bring off Foden. Grealish comes in. They bring off Bernardo Silva. Mahrez comes in. There's like-for-like replacements in the midfield and the forward lines. And they're a little bit short at the back, but they...
Drop names. Who? Where? How much?
For Arsenal.
This January. Yeah, what do you do in January?
Well, Mudryk is the biggest...
No, but what would you do?
What would I do?
Even if you wipe Mudryk clean, even if he doesn't come and you're just starting from... January 1st, nothing's happening.
Tillemans for Xhaka. There was one that I saw on Tifo Football for...
Shout out the Tifo boys again.
Yeah. There was a midfielder from... Shit, I can't remember what team it was. I think he played for Ghana. I think it starts with M. Can't remember exactly. He's young. He's like 20 years old.
What, from Ajax? Kudos?
I think so, yeah. It might be Kudos, not...
Attacking midfielder.
Yeah, I think he was. I think they shouted him out that he'd be perfect for him to come in. I think it was Kudos. I need to see more of him before I throw my name into that. He's hat.
Looked good, but he'd play very much in Ødegaard's position.
Yeah, I've mentioned Meyer to come in, but then you have Ødegaard. If Meyer then plays for Xhaka, but Xhaka's a left footer as well. You could play Ødegaard and Xhaka together, but Meyer is very similar to Ødegaard from what I've seen. So I don't know. At least with Ødegaard and Xhaka, you're getting 2 different styles or 2 different options. Whereas if you play Ødegaard and Meyer together in the midfield, you're getting two of like the exact same or similar type of player. Defensively, I think we need to add a centre back, because if Saliba or Gabriel get injured, then Holding comes in. So We need to find a centre back. I'm not sure who we should get. I'd love to get Guardiola. I said he would be perfect. He would be perfect to actually replace Gabriel, and then Gabriel goes to
100%.
Gabriel goes to basically like being on the bench. They have the money actually. They have the money actually because apparently the Cronkies are actually the richest sports family in America. I think the recent Deloitte whatever standings or whatever report came out that they're actually now the richest sporting family in America. So they have the money to actually go out and get him. It's just a question of whether they want to go out and get him. Actually break the bank and make him the most expensive defender of all time.
We need some answers. What are they getting? What would you get in January?
Mudryk, Meyer. I still want Sheik. I still want Sheik. I still want him.
You can get a cup prize.
Yeah. Vlahovic, I'm not too hot on just because he did reject us last summer. So he showed that he wouldn't play for the badge. And Arteta wants people playing for the badge. That fits his mold of personality of the player. Vlahovic has shown that he doesn't have the personality to play for Arsenal, even though he has the quality to play for Arsenal.
Yeah, well, I think we'll see. We'll see if injuries derail him, but I think I would put it. All right, here's the final question to wrap a bow on Arsenal because we've been talking about it for far too long. But if they were to get injuries in some of those key positions that we speak, I can't just imagine that it's enough to sort of hinder them. They already have with Gabriel Jesus. But if they were to get injuries in those key areas, or if they were to not be able to win games like this one against Newcastle, where you're maybe suggesting they need something better to bring off the bench to maybe change the game, would you put that down to poor squad planning, or would you just put that down to bad luck if they weren't to finish the job from this point? Which, let's be honest, there's still more than half the season left, so it's a long finishing of the job.
Well, let's contrast it to, for instance, to Chelsea. I think I saw that Chelsea has 8 injuries. So Chilwell, James, now Mount, and Sterling. I'm not sure how serious Sterling is, but he came off after 2 minutes. So let's chuck Sterling in there. Breuer,
Pulisic,
Kante, Fofana. I don't know if Fofana's currently injured, but yeah, that's 8.
Yeah, he is. He's. I think he did something serious. I think he did an ACL or something.
So they have 8 injuries to you'd say pretty key players, and yet their starting 11 is still pretty dangerous. Now imagine
Chelsea.
Imagine we get injuries to 8 key players. We're fucked.
Well, yeah, of course, but is Chelsea have been unlucky, but they've also had bad squad planning. I think they're a bit of both. So from this point, if you were to get a few injuries and maybe it costs you finishing the job and City come roaring back, I would put that more in bad luck. I think.
Yeah, I'd put that more in bad luck.
People want the squad to be good, but to this point, I guess the squad has been good. There's been a few players having to come in and out. Jesus is now injured. I think we've been harping on this one. I think still the main one, and I know you highlighted a lot of positions where maybe they need replacements, but the main one is Thomas Partey.
Not replacement, but backup.
Yeah, that's the main one for me. I think everywhere else they can sort of get by, especially if they get Mudryk. That front line is fine now, with Nketiah showing himself to be able.
Yeah, and it also, one or two, if you get Mudryk, you can also play Martinelli down the centre.
Exactly. You could play that fluid front four. I think from this point,
from what I've seen, and we'll try to wrap up Arsenal on this. From what I've seen from the All or Nothing documentary, they did show how they sort of plan the the signings or at least the positions. Like they had everything up on a
Yeah,
whiteboard,
yeah.
and they're like, okay, we need to find a backup for this position. We're fine in this position in terms of starting 11, but we need to find a backup for it. So I think they're planning. They've shown that they're very calculated and smart about it. But I guess the thing is, how much are they willing to actually dish out? Because I think they offered, the latest bid was been 65 mil for Mudryk, and I think that one got rejected. So what, do they need to offer 70 mil now in January, or do they need to offer 80
like
for them to accept it? Because Shakhtar, then they're no longer in the Champions League, so like why are they holding on to him? Because they want more money. So do they just say, okay, fuck it, we'll just get him in summer, and we'll get him we'll get him for 60 or so. But then with that, then they sort of go, okay, we're like last season, we're risking the title challenge now. Last season they risked the top 4 challenge by not signing anyone, and then injuries started to occur.
So are you saying they need Mudryk, and then it's bad luck if anything happens like that? But if they don't go for him, would you call it poor judgment on their behalf to not do it? Or is there a cutoff price?
I don't know. It's sort of a little bit of both, because you can't foresee injuries. Like Martinelli and Saka, they've been fully fit this whole season. Gabriel Jesus was fully fit, and then he gets injured in training for Brazil. Like, he doesn't get injured in a game; he gets injured in training for Brazil. And like a bad enough injury for him to need surgery as well. Like, not just like a knock or whatever that keeps him out for like 3 or 4 weeks or whatever. But yeah, I think with injuries, there's obviously an element of bad luck. Unless you have a poor medical staff, then it's not bad luck.
Oh, we don't know that.
Yeah.
All right.
But anyway,
let's get away from Arsenal. I'm sick of Arsenal. All right, that's enough talk about this. We've been going forever.
All right, you lead us in the direction you want to lead us into.
I don't think there's much to talk about with United. They just played Bournemouth. I think what we've been saying in terms of Casemiro being brilliant for them. Again, I think we both knew he'd be brilliant for them, and they got a midfielder who probably is the best midfielder at doing two or multiple jobs at once in there. Maybe taking the crown off and goal like Kante. Although we never really had to see him do that at Real Madrid, but like I keep saying, the development that he has to undertake at Man United because they need him to do more, and he's perfectly capable of. We have an intruder.
I think someone's entering my door.
Entering your door?
I think. Hang on. Ah, okay, it's Tiff. Yeah, I was like, who the hell has keys? Like, there's only one person that has keys.
Let's wrap this up then.
Nah, go on.
But yeah, United, I don't really have many points. Casemiro's been brilliant. Keeps developing even though he's 30 years old. Luke Shaw has been brilliant as well. Wan-Bissaka's being reclaimed by Ten Hag and made to look like a good player. And Rashford, we're all waxing lyrical about him. Martial's fitting in well in the front four, so they look dangerous. Obviously, they have, I don't know who they're playing this weekend, but they'll have their test against Arsenal in a couple of weekends' time, and that'll be fascinating to watch, and we'll get to see.
Wait, United are facing City this weekend coming.
Yeah, thank you. I thought we talked about who they have, and it was a big game. So, yeah, United, the next 2 weeks, I'm really fascinated to see what happens with them. What the level they're at, but I think we'll have a lot to talk about it on them in the next 2 weeks, so we don't really need to focus on that. So I guess with that being said, it's time to probably go on to the continent, and obviously Serie A came back, and obviously big game in Serie A was Inter v Napoli, and I thought straight away, I know you didn't watch the game, I don't know if you watched the highlights or anything, but I thought straight away you could see with Inter starting with Lukaku, you could see the Lukaku effect in this game straight away, because Napoli came in with ideas of a high press, a 4-2-4 press, and Inter did their thing, which they've been doing under Conte, now they're doing under Inzaghi. of they play from the back, but they don't play out from the back. They sort of just hold the ball between their defenders and their goalkeeper, and they suck a team into the press. And obviously, before when you had Dzeko and Lautaro up front, how dangerous is that? Like, they're not really physical presence. Lautaro is not slow, but not quick. Dzeko, we know, isn't quick enough to sort of cause you problems in behind. So even if they did suck you in, what are they going to do? We can go and press. We're not scared. With Lukaku straight away, I know a lot is made fun of his touch and everything, and he's obviously going to be rusty, and he missed a few good chances at the start of this game. But straight away, with Napoli wanting to press high, when Inter did play that ball over the top, Lukaku can occupy so many more defenders. He's pretty much a 1v1 battle for Kim Min-jae, who's maybe the best centre-back in the world on form. So I thought straight away you could see that effect in this game. And I thought Inter were good value for the 1-0. They created a lot more chances than Napoli. Napoli couldn't break down sort of the 5 defenders approach of Inter, which was 5 defenders. There were barely wing backs with Darmian and DiMarco playing as the left and right wing back, who were very astute and could probably play in a 4. So there was just no spaces for Napoli to play those balls into. And Napoli's midfield was very disappointing. Zielinski and Anguissa, who, particularly Anguissa, who I think has had a fantastic season to this point, was non-existent. They didn't impose themselves on the sort of diminutive 3 of Inter in Çalhanoğlu, Mkhitaryan and Barella, who obviously the thing that's interesting with Inter playing this way is playing with 5 defensive sort of defenders in a back 5, but then they play with 3 midfielders who are all probably number 10s. All 3 of them are number 10s, and they can sort of overload and play in areas all together, and they'll tend to be sort of fluid in their movement. They'll sort of play close together so that they can link up. Again, like the midfield, they played more of a containing play after they went long. But yeah, I thought Inter's midfield thoroughly outplayed Napoli's. And yeah, Napoli looked about as ordinary as they have all season. Kvaratskhelia couldn't get into the game. Osimhen, Acerbi did a fantastic man marking on Osimhen. So yeah, Napoli's first loss in the league. Inter are a very good big team or big game team, as they've shown in the Champions League, coming out of that. That's such a tough group. And they get the big scalp in Serie A, which kind of opens the door for AC Milan because they get a 2-1 win at, I believe, Salernitana in the early game. They sort of somewhat coasted to it. Rafael Leao sort of pops up with his moments because he's unstoppable if you give him any kind of space. Theo Hernandez sort of roving around as he does, creating, which was good to see again. AC, then Tonali pops up with a goal. Tonali, we know how good he is. I think AC...
Oh, Tonali for Arsenal. That's one name I forgot.
He'd be a replacement, though. He wouldn't be a backup, that's for sure. He's so good. But yeah, I think if I'm AC Milan, I'm looking at upgrading the sort of the right wing position. And I think Brahim Diaz is a good number 10, so I don't think they need anything there. Calabria's back after his injury, so that's good news for them. It's probably right wing and holding midfielder because I'm still not convinced by Benacer. I would look if they still had Frank Kessie. Wow, they'd be some team only looking for really a right winger or a right midfielder who fits into that system. But yeah, I think this title race is still 100% on for as good as Napoli were going into the break. And yeah, Inter have thrown a spanner in the works, and AC, I think 5 points behind Napoli now. So game on. Game on there. And I guess we touched on Juve, but Juve are approaching quick.
They're second now, but 1 game ahead.
Exactly,
and
crazy.
You forgot to mention this now makes Napoli there's no more undefeated teams in the leagues. In the top 5 leagues, I don't know about the rest of them, but like there's no in the top 5 leagues, no more undefeated teams.
Well, like we said last pod, Benfica and PSG both lost their records, but they were unbeaten in all competitions. And yeah, obviously now Napoli lose theirs in the league, so they're the last team in league football. Look, they still they still looked like a good Napoli team, but is there going to be a regression? We'll have to wait and see. Juve, I can't believe they're somewhat in a title. I cannot believe that Juve are somewhat in a title race, but their defense keeps defending on. They're getting Chiesa back. They still haven't got Pogba back. They're doing this without Vlahovic. I can't explain it. I really can't.
The Allegri effect. He knows how to. Well, he knows how to play the league.
I would give it to the fact that he finally realized the experienced players aren't better than the young players that he has coming through, and I'll also give it to the fact that they play a 5-3-2, which I think is a very good system, and it hides a lot of flaws that teams have, much more than a 3-4-3. I think it's the formation that raises your floor the most, or the easiest, should I say, because you give a lot of protection in two key areas, which are centre back and midfield, and you still have the ability to play with a partnership up front. So you can still stay threatening. And if you have good players in all those positions, which Juve have good enough players to do that, they're showing that they could get back into a title race somehow. I still put AC as chief challengers. And then that race for top four is going to be really interesting. Atalanta draw 2-2 with Spezia in an interesting game. Lazio lose, I believe, and they're sort of somewhat falling off. Did Lazio lose? I have the results here. I can't remember their game. I need to see. Udinese draw as well, and yeah, Lazio lost 2-1 at Lecce, and Roma win as well, so they're somehow in a race. So I haven't enjoyed watching Roma at all.
Yeah, Lazio did lose. Huh.
Yeah, they did. So, yeah, Serie A continues to maybe be my favourite league to watch because of how many teams I want to watch on the weekly basis. I could extend that lead maybe to 8 teams that I want to watch pretty much every week. And yeah, it's just, I think 5-3-2, just to finish on the big overall picture on Serie A, I think 5-3-2 is somewhat the cheat code in Serie A. You look at a lot of good teams playing that way. It was funny, actually. Atalanta sort of tried to play that way in their game, and they went 2-0 down, and when they changed back to a 3-4-3, they looked better for it. So there's an example of a team who play better in that system over the 5-3-2. But I look at Juve, like we're talking about. We look at Inter playing the 5-3-2. We look at Udinese having a great season playing 5-3-2. So, yeah, I think for those teams who maybe don't trust their quality in midfield and defence all that much, then that's somewhat the cheat code in Serie A. But yeah, fascinating league, and it's good to have it back. And we'll look forward to the last league resuming. I think now is the Bundesliga, which I think we might still have a little bit of a wait on that. But yeah, good to have Serie A back, and that title race is not wide open. You still put Napoli as the best team in Italy, but if this result turns into 1 or 2 sort of stumbles, all of a sudden that title race is wide open, and it could expand to a lot of teams. I mean, it could expand as far down as Inter. But yeah, it's a fascinating league, and it's good to have it back.
I need to start getting into it a little bit more.
Yeah, I love Serie A, man.
It looks really fascinating, but yeah, I need to start watching it as intensely as you do. The only issue that like I think my focus is on the Premier League too much, and like, you know, with games being on at the same time, I sort of can't be stuff rewatching, like going back and watching the game on demand, even though I don't know the results, which is like the main factor why I can't watch games. Is if I know the result, I can't watch it. So like I don't know the result, so I can go back and watch it, but I don't know. I think I don't want to dedicate too much time to football.
What you want to hear on a football pod.
you know what I'm saying.
I'm winding you up, man. I'll carry the load for the continent. Don't worry. Yeah,
you're doing a more than adequate job at doing that. Any other?
I do it because it helps my Champions League predictions as well.
Yeah, that would help you a lot in Champions League. Whereas like, I'd know slightly less. I used to follow La Liga a lot more back in the day, but like I've even like regressed on La Liga.
Probably fair in recent years, to be
Yeah,
fair.
I guess I was gonna say that. Like maybe that's actually fair. Like La Liga has actually regressed, and it would be interesting to bring up like the viewership numbers over the past like 5 seasons or 10 seasons of each of the leagues to see how they've trended. Whether the numbers have gone up or down or stayed relatively the same. I imagine La Liga would have gone down since Ronaldo left and Messi left.
Yeah, that's what you'd think. But La Liga in its own right, which we'll talk about on the next pod because they'll have a full slate of fixtures to talk about. But yeah, I think that's fascinating in its own right this season. I think France, I guess with Lens, I'm fascinated by Lens for sure, and PSG as well. But Germany, if Leipzig can finally be a good team, then maybe I'll be a bit more fascinated. Maybe not for a title race, but just good to see another good team in that league. So, but yeah, Serie A, and it probably goes for me, Premier League, closely followed by Serie A, and then maybe a little bit of a drop to La Liga, and then Germany and France still.
Yeah, Serie A
Ghost.
looks like it looks similar to Premier League in terms, like maybe not in terms of quality.
It's Premier League 15 years ago. It's great.
I imagine,
love it.
yeah, but even it might be similar to the Premier League now, where there's like 6 to 8 teams that are interesting, and like they're sort of battling for the title or for top 4. It's similar like that in Serie A, where there's 6 to 8 teams battling for those top 4, top 6 positions.
And it's fantastic for Serie A that they get three teams out of the group stage in the Champions League as well.
Yeah, that's telling as well that the quality is going up, because the past 4, 5, 6 seasons, it was only Juve getting out of the group stage, I think.
It was only Inter last season, I think.
Yeah, there was only like one team getting out of the group.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's good for them.
Yeah.
And it's good to have them back.
Caleb, we began the pod by... I tried to get into Liverpool Brentford, and we skipped over it. Did we skip over it because you did not want to talk about it? Or did we sort of just go on a sidetrack and then that just led us? So let's finish on Liverpool Brentford.
Yeah, perfect. Do you have a question? Because I have a question.
I don't have any questions, so I'm leaving it to the resident Liverpool man.
All right, no, like here's a broad question. We'll try and do it quick, but Jurgen Klopp, thoughts? Go. Floor's yours.
Well, you mentioned earlier Arteta makes himself really dislikable, and I said that Klopp has made himself very dislikable for me. Like there's certain elements where I'm like, okay, I really like him, and then he says things where you're just like, man, you're just whining, you're just complaining, you're being a little bitch, and he makes himself really unlikable. Whereas I contrast that with someone like Pep. I don't know if Pep has said anything or done anything or acted in any way to actually make himself unlikable for a neutral. And I think I've spoken to Matthias about this. Like Matthias, despite Liverpool and Man City having a rivalry for the past 5-6 seasons, Matthias actually really likes Pep. And he likes Pep teams. And I think any neutral would like a Pep team. And Pep makes himself very likable. Like I don't think he ever acts or says anything where you're like, oh man, that pisses me off or that rubs me up the wrong way. Whereas like you've said, Arteta says and does stuff that rubs you up the wrong way and rubs other managers up the wrong way. There's things that Klopp does and says that rubs other managers and other people, like pundits or analysts, up the wrong way as well. So yeah, Pep, Klopp. I don't know whether he does that to divert things away from the team when the team's doing poorly, and to put the focus more on himself and take the headlines himself. That might be a tactic that he sort of does to take the heat on himself, and that way he can then behind closed doors scold his team, rather than have the media focused on individual performances or individual players. So maybe it's actually a smart thing that he does that.
Of course, that's the old adage. I don't know. With Jurgen Klopp, in the case of his character, which wasn't what I was going to talk about, but we've kind of gone this way. But I've said it before. I think when he does those post-match interviews, yeah, there's always going to be excuses in there, and he's a bit of a whiner in terms of that. But for me, it's a lot of it is just him emptying his thoughts in the post-match interviews or in the pre-match. He gets given a topic and he sort of just like clears all his notes, gives you all his notes he has on that topic, and there's going to be some good, some annoying, some bad, some you just don't agree with. But yeah, I think he's pretty much an open book in terms of those interviews, and I guess I think that's maybe why he's a bit more, well, has been for years, maybe not so much, but a bit more likable in the media. Whereas Arteta can have this tendency to get snarky and snappy and sarcastic, which isn't always fun to deal with, especially if you're interviewing him. But Klopp can get snarky at people as well. So as much of a muchness, it comes with the territory of being a manager. But I guess. Oh, and the Pep point, I've found Pep quite dislikable on occasions in the past. There's no doubt about it.
Well, when he's always beating you and taking Liverpool to like 98 or 99 points and still making them lose the league, I imagine that he would be very dislikable.
I don't love that. I will say at the moment I don't like. This is maybe one of the first times in a long time I haven't liked a Pep team. Right now in this present moment, but who knows, that could turn around and we remember him for different reasons than what we're seeing at the moment. But yeah, for the first time in a long time, I don't really like this Pep team. It has the potential, but I don't like how it's playing. But yeah, I've been wound up by Pep on many occasions. But obviously, you point to that intense rivalry we have, but yeah. But I was going to talk more about Klopp on the technical side of things, and I don't think it will take a hell of a lot for it to ever become a question of Klopp out. But do we have to start having questions of, is Klopp still good? It's hard to say still. It's only half a season from last season where they were maybe the best team in Europe. But is Klopp really to that level technically as a manager? Because we saw in 2021, and again, we started the pod and again, I still think it's a miracle we finished third that season. I don't know how with the team he had, so kudos. But again, we're having this scenario where he maybe has to think about reinventing what he does tactically. And again, we've reached a point where it looked like he might, and he's regressed back to, well, can you say regressed? We'll see by the results of the season. And then the subsequent season, really, as last season showed, to that 2021 season. But yeah, is it now a question, is Klopp that good? Is Klopp still good? And is the name of Klopp, if Liverpool have a poor season this season, still enough to attract the best players to Liverpool, the players who they are being linked with? Obviously, Cody Gakpo is a great signing. Maybe not the required signing, but the required signings will come in the shape of Jude Bellingham, who we're getting linked to. Is it enough to bring those players over if we have a poor season this season, don't get Champions League? Is the name of Jurgen Klopp still to that standard to attract the best talent?
I think it is. He's proved himself that over the past 10 years, 12 years that it is. I think it's just a team that's going through that phase where it's been at the top.
7th season.
Yeah, like and
the curse.
But you know what, like, if you contrast that to City, for instance, City have brought in players, like one or two players every season to come in, whereas Liverpool, it's been the same starting 11. You haven't brought anyone in, well, not even one player to refresh things and to change things up. It's like you know exactly who the starting 11 is going to be for the past 5 or 6 seasons. When you guys did win the Champions League and go on that run, like once Alisson and Salah came in, it's been the same starting 11. You're like, okay, it pretty much picks itself. Whereas with City, it's like, okay, Grealish came in last season. This season they signed Haaland. So like it's being every season it gets refreshed with 1 or 2 signings. Liverpool, no, I think you've been signing players, but they've been squad players. They haven't been players to actually replace players in that starting 11. And this season is the season where you're back to having to replace players in the starting 11.
I know. Well, you've put me somewhat at ease with that answer. But I will say,
but this is his chance to, if he doesn't rebuild in the squad now, then yeah, maybe he is starting to regress, or maybe his time with Liverpool is over.
That's the point, because we got to this 7th season, we haven't seen him come out the other side, because at Dortmund, obviously, that was his time to call it a day at Dortmund and go on to his new challenge at Liverpool eventually. So with the new contract, if he fulfills it, we will get a chance to see what he does on the other side of his 7th season curse. We'll see how he looks to rebuild the squad, how he, in conjunction with the club, look to rebuild the squad. But I will say, on the technical aspect of coaching, or the tactical aspect, I won't be as disrespectful to say Guardiola runs circles around Klopp, because results wouldn't suggest that in recent seasons either. But if you give Guardiola the new players, and I think Liverpool have signed a lot of new players in recent seasons. I know maybe the starting 11 hasn't changed all that much. Maybe City's has changed a little bit more. But Liverpool have made enough signings to the squad. Remember last season we'll talk about how deep the squad was, maybe the best squad in Europe. We'll talk about all of this. So I think if Guardiola gets all of those things, I think whatever he has to work with, he makes it work in a better way, or he adjusts in a better way. Whereas Klopp, and it's funny I say that because Guardiola's a manager who could be criticised for not working with certain players and personalities in the past. But yeah, it's funny that Klopp, I think, has never shown that ability to change and adapt. It's more bring in players for that system, and they haven't. I guess they haven't done that. I guess Klopp might need to look at adapting, but they might finish top 4 again and everything's fine, and then they have next season where everyone's a bit more bedded in and they're fantastic. So I think you're right. It's too early to call for sure, but we need to see Klopp come out the other side. And the thing that worries me the most as a Liverpool supporter is that enough to keep attracting the best talent if you're not in the Champions League anymore? And that's a question that will be answered whether we get into Champions League or not. If we get into Champions League, fine, everything's good. If we don't, then we're going to have our answers in the off season and what kind of talent we can attract.
You know what my thoughts are in regards to that, the Champions League question? It's like, I think Klopp as a name and Liverpool as a name is enough to attract the top players. If you don't have Champions League, similar to United this season that don't have Champions League, you then need to pay the player
100 mil for Anthony.
No.
That's what you need to do.
The club to club fee is going to remain the way it is. Like it's the player wages that are going to go up. It's like if the player's like, okay, you don't have Champions League this season, I want 10,000 more per week, or 15 or 20,000 more per week. Otherwise, I'm not coming because I'm playing Champions League where I am right now.
That's worrying in itself because Liverpool's wage structure won't allow that.
Yeah, but I imagine that might be the discussion when they're signing players, rather than, oh, you don't have Champions League football, I'm not coming. It's, okay, you don't have Champions League football, you need to pay me more, otherwise I'll just come next season if you do get Champions League football, or I'm going to sign for a club that has Champions League football that's offering the same wages. So that's where Champions League football, or lack of Champions League football, comes into question. I think it comes into the personal player wages.
And that's my worry as a Liverpool supporter right now.
Yeah.
And I think that was a good time to bring up that question. Too early to call, but
yeah, I think we need to see how they go this season, because like I said, it's the first season where Klopp has had to start to slowly rebuild, and it looks like he probably thought that the midfield was good enough to continue from last season. It looks like it isn't. And yeah, I think also you guys need to look at selling Salah, to be honest. Maybe this summer.
Maybe. We'll see.
To finish up, really quick question, and it sort of goes back to the Arsenal game with the added time, but and it also goes back to the World Cup. Do you want to see 10 minutes of added time to games? The better timekeeping management that we saw at the World Cup, or are you fine with going back to 3 to 4 to 5 minutes of added time?
I think if teams are being egregious about wasting time, I think let's use it. Let's use it as a weapon. Let's get 10 minutes up on the board. Let's get 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes up on the board. But yeah, I think you could tell.
Well, you know what though? Like watching the games at the World Cup and watching them now in club football, they look very similar in terms of substitutions, in terms of teams, in terms of like the ball going out of play, free kicks and whatnot. Players themselves, time wasting. It's very similar. So how come at the World Cup we're getting 8 to 10 minutes or more?
Oh, it's a different govening body.
Exactly. And they're being more strict in terms of actually stopping the clock and getting like for a throw in getting those 10 seconds or 15 seconds, or for a corner getting those 30. I reckon corners take 30 seconds to actually take, or even a minute.
Goalkeepers can hold the ball for nearly 30 seconds sometimes. It's ridiculous.
They're not allowed to, but yeah, they do it.
They're not allowed to, but they can sometimes. Sometimes you can skip that far ahead, and especially any free kick, you can skip 30 seconds if the team. I reckon
even a minute. Like the team defending, like when they're setting up their wall, they can make the wall step forward, and then the ref's like, no, stop, you need to go back. That wastes like 10, 15 seconds. Like I reckon they need to actually be more strict on that. And we saw at the World Cup how, I guess, punishing it was. Because, for instance, the Netherlands-Argentina game, if that was 5 minutes of of added time, that's not going to 2-2.
Yeah, it's fair, and I'm happy to see it go that way. It's no surprise that you're bringing up these concerns after the Newcastle game.
I thought it initially. I wanted to bring it up on the last pod or even the one before that. Because I saw it. Like I'm like, okay, we're going back to 2, 3, 4 minutes of added time. I think we need to go back to, and we talked about like the whole time wasting thing like before the World Cup. Like it was obviously a question where like out of the 90 minutes, like on average, I think 55 or 60 minutes of actual ball in play time is there as a statistic. And then we saw at the World Cup they're doing this where they're being more strict on time management. So I thought that, I'm like, okay, this is football going in the right direction and trying to stamp out time wasting, and now it seems like we're actually regressing.
Is that what you trying to make up for it on this pod by running 2 hours 20 and taking us into that? We've got an extra 20 minutes of added time on this pod.
just a little extra content for our viewers.
Well, man, I'm happy. Just make sure that we're all on the same page if whatever we're doing. But yeah, I think when it's egregious time wasting, let's get a high number on the board because we know what that team's trying to do, and let's make there a consequence for it.
Yeah, let's start actually being a little bit more strict on it. But Caleb, any other thoughts or closing arguments?
I'm fine for now. Let's reconvene sometime soon after all the weekend fixtures are done, and we'll talk about them. Yeah,
we'll hopefully. Like I think I threw in 1 or 2 hiccups while the microphone was on. So hopefully I did a good job and didn't hiccup in people's ears or cough.
No, you did. Very professional. Now what we got to do, we got to at the Tifo boys and link them to the pod because we gave them two shout outs on this. So.
Yeah, we should do that. Try and actually clip out the shout outs. Caleb, it's been a pleasure. We will be, and for everyone that has stood with us for the last 2 hours and 20 minutes almost, thanks for coming, and bye for now.